I stood in my father's living room, my hands shaking but my feet planted firm. Howard's voice filled every corner of the house, rattling the windows and my chest. Say you're sorry, Mariel. Apologize for what you did to your sister, or you're no daughter of mine. Cambria sat on the couch, tears streaming down her perfect face. Cole, my boyfriend of 3 years, stood by the fireplace watching me like I was a stranger. My throat closed tight, but I forced the words out anyway. I won't apologize for your lies, Cambria. The room went silent. My father's face turned red. Get out. Get out of my house right now. I walked to the door on legs that barely held me. The cold morning air hit my face as I stepped outside. Behind me, the door slammed so hard the windows shook. I stood there on the porch, looking at the sunrise breaking through the clouds, and whispered to myself, my name is Mariel Vance, and that was the morning my family buried me alive. The day before, everything had seemed almost normal. Cambria called me that afternoon, her voice sweet as honey. Dad wants to have a family meeting tomorrow morning. He thinks it's time we all talked about Mom's things. I hesitated. Cambria and I hadn't been close since Mom died 2 years ago, but I wanted peace. I wanted my family back. Okay. What time? 7. And Mariel? Bring that photo album you took from the house. The one with Mom's wedding pictures. I didn't take it. Mom gave it to me before she died. But I said yes anyway, hoping it would help. That night, I wrapped the album carefully and placed it in my bag. Cole kissed my forehead and said, maybe this will fix things. I wanted to believe him. I went to bed thinking tomorrow might be the day we started healing. I had no idea Cambria had spent the entire evening building a trap, brick by brick, lie by lie. Cole drove me to Dad's house that morning. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight, and he barely spoke. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally looked at me. Just apologize if you have to, okay? Sometimes keeping the peace is more important than being right. His words hit me like cold water. What do you mean? Your dad called me last night. He told me about the incident. About what you said to Cambria at the cemetery. My stomach dropped. What incident? I haven't been to the cemetery with Cambria in months. Cole's face told me he didn't believe me. Look, I'm not taking sides. I just think you should smooth this over. For everyone's sake. I stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. The man I loved would rather I lie than stand up for truth. You'd rather keep peace than keep truth, I whispered. He didn't answer. I got out of the car and walked toward the house alone. By 8 o'clock that morning, I had nothing. My father handed me an envelope with my name crossed out in red ink. Inside was a letter removing me from all family accounts. My grandmother's necklace, which Mom promised me, was already gone. My clothes and gardening tools sat in boxes on the porch. I loaded everything into my truck while Cambria watched from the upstairs window, phone pressed to her ear. The mailman walked up the driveway, saw me, and quickly looked away. He'd already heard the rumors. Everyone had. I drove away slowly, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror. At the corner, I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door standing in her yard. Cambria was talking to her, pointing at me, shaking her head sadly. I could read Mrs. Patterson's lips as she said, I always wondered about that girl. Cambria smiled. A real smile. Not the fake tears from earlier. And I understood then, this had never been about Mom's album. This was about erasing me completely. The Starlight Motel sat on the edge of town, its neon sign flickering against the afternoon sky. I paid cash for a week and carried my boxes inside. The room smelled like old carpet and cheap soap. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall until the sun went down. That night, rain hammered the window. I finally broke. I called Dad's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I called twice more. Nothing. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, mascara streaked down my face, and barely recognized the woman staring back. You can't keep letting them rewrite your story, I told my reflection. I opened my laptop and searched for garden restoration jobs. Mom taught me everything about plants, about coaxing life from dirt. If my family wouldn't have me, the earth still would. I applied to 5 positions before midnight, my hands steady for the first time all day. 2 days later, Eleanor Reeves called. Her voice was gentle but strong. I need someone to restore my gardens. They've been neglected since my husband died. Are you available? I drove to her estate that afternoon. The house was beautiful but sad, surrounded by overgrown roses and dying hydrangeas. Eleanor met me at the door, silver hair pulled back, eyes that saw everything. She walked me through the gardens, pointing out what used to bloom where. Can you bring them back to life? She asked. I knelt in the dirt, touching the dry soil. Yes. It'll take time, but yes. She hired me on the spot. As I was leaving, she paused. You seem like you're carrying something heavy, dear. I won't pry. But gardens are good listeners. I drove back to the motel with tears in my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. Someone had seen me as more than Cambria's lying sister. Saturday morning, I went to the farmer's market for supplies. I was comparing soil mixtures when I heard 2 women talking behind me. Did you hear about the Vance family? Cambria saved their reputation after what Mariel did. What did she do? Stole jewelry, said terrible things about their dead mother. Can you imagine? My hands froze on the bag of fertilizer. I could have turned around. Could have defended myself. Instead, I noticed the women struggling with heavy crates of vegetables. I walked over quietly and lifted one. Let me help you to your car. They went silent, not recognizing me at first. I carried 3 crates for them without saying a word. As I walked away, I heard one whisper, "Was that?" The other gasped. Oh no. Oh, I think it was. Silence could be more powerful than screaming. I learned that in the dirt between the tomato stands and their guilty faces. Eleanor's garden slowly came back to life under my hands. Pink roses climbed the trellises again. White hydrangeas bloomed in clusters. Purple lavender lined the stone paths. Every morning, I arrived at dawn and worked until dusk. Eleanor brought me lemonade and watched me work. She introduced me to her friends, women who ran businesses, sat on charity boards, made decisions that mattered. They saw my work ethic, my attention to detail, and they remembered my name. You have a gift, Mrs. Pemberton said, running her hand over a restored rose bush. My garden needs help. Would you come look at it? One job became 2, then 5. Word spread through Eleanor's circle. While Cambria told lies to our old neighbors, I built truth with my hands in the soil. 3 weeks after I left home, an envelope arrived at the motel. Inside was an invitation to my father's 65th birthday dinner, written in Cambria's perfect handwriting. I stared at that invitation for 2 days. Eleanor found me in her garden, turning it over and over in my hands. Are you going to go? She asked. I don't know. Part of me wants closure. Part of me knows it's probably a trap. Eleanor sat beside me on the stone bench. Some people only invite you to watch you bleed. But sometimes, walking into the room is the only way to show them you're still standing. That night, I pressed Mom's pendant to my chest, the one thing Cambria hadn't managed to take. I remembered Mom's last words to me, light finds truth, baby. Always. I decided to go, not for revenge or even for forgiveness. I went to be seen as myself, not as Cambria's victim. As I buttoned my best dress the next evening, I whispered, this time, I'll let the light find them. The birthday dinner was held at Wellington Hall, the nicest restaurant in 3 counties. I walked in wearing Mom's pendant and a simple blue dress. Cambria stood near the entrance in diamonds and silk, greeting guests like a queen. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Mariel. You came. You invited me. The dinner was exactly what I expected. Expensive, uncomfortable, and full of people who believed Cambria's version of our story. But I sat straight, spoke when spoken to, and didn't defend myself when whispers floated past. Halfway through dinner, Cambria stood to make an announcement about her new charity project using funds that were supposed to go to Mom's memorial scholarship. Dad raised his glass. To Cambria, the daughter who stood by me through everything. Cambria's hand trembled slightly as she smiled, but only I noticed. The cracks were already forming. I just had to wait for the light to find them. After dinner, I stood on the terrace alone, watching the sun set over the valley. Footsteps approached behind me. I never believed it, you know. It was Mr. Dowram, Dad's oldest friend. The story about you stealing your mother's jewelry. I turned to face him. He looked tired and sad. I saw Cambria at an estate sale 6 months ago, he continued quietly. She was selling your mother's watch. The one with the inscription. When I asked her about it, she said your father gave it to her. But I remember, your mother wanted you to have it. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. Did you tell my father? I tried. He wouldn't listen. Mr. Dowram put his hand on my shoulder. Sometimes truth doesn't need a fight, Mariel. It just needs witnesses. And I see you. He walked back inside, leaving me alone with the knowledge that someone finally knew. The truth had found its first witness. 2 weeks later, Eleanor asked me to help organize a charity event for widows in the community. I hesitated when I saw the sponsor list. Cambria's charity group was one of them. I know this might be difficult, Eleanor said gently. But your work deserves to be seen. The event was held in the town square. I set up flower arrangements and welcomed guests. Cambria arrived with cameras and reporters, playing the perfect philanthropist. When she saw me, her smile tightened. Mariel. She air-kissed near my cheek. How wonderful that you could volunteer. Eleanor asked me to help organize it, I corrected quietly. Her eyes narrowed, but the cameras were watching. She forced a laugh. Of course. The prodigal sister returns. She walked away before I could respond, but I saw her hands shaking. My calm presence threatened her more than any argument ever could. That evening, Cole appeared at the event, now working for Cambria's husband's firm. Our eyes met across the crowd of people. Cole found me in the parking lot as I loaded empty vases into my truck. The sun had nearly set, painting everything orange and gold. Mariel, wait. Please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said. For how things looked. Your father told me you were unstable, that you were making up stories about Cambria. I didn't know what to believe. I finally faced him. His face looked older, tired. You chose to believe I was crazy instead of asking me for the truth. You chose comfort over conscience, Cole. That's all I needed to know. Can we at least talk about? No. I climbed into my truck. There's nothing left to say. I drove away, watching him shrink in my rearview mirror. He'd made his choice months ago. I'd finally accepted it. As I turned onto the main road, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the weight we carry isn't the hurt they caused, it's hoping they'll finally understand. The charity event had been more successful than anyone expected. Eleanor's friends donated generously, and my garden designs were photographed for the local newspaper. Cambria saw the article and couldn't help herself. At a luncheon the following week, she told a group of donors that she'd personally financed Eleanor's entire charity foundation. Eleanor, who was standing right there, simply smiled and said, "That's interesting, dear. Because I started this foundation in 1987 with my late husband's life insurance money." The women around them went quiet. Cambria's face flushed red. I meant I contributed significantly. You donated $50 last year, Eleanor said gently but firmly. Which was very kind. Cambria grabbed her purse and left quickly. But not before snapping at a young volunteer who'd accidentally bumped her table. The girl's phone was out, recording for the Foundation's social media. She caught everything. The video started circulating quietly at first. Just among Eleanor's circle, then broader. It showed Cambria's true face, sharp, entitled, mean to someone who couldn't fight back. The whispers that had protected her for months started to turn. I heard about it from Mrs. Pemberton while I planted autumn mums in her garden. People are starting to ask questions, she said carefully. About the jewelry. About your mother's scholarship fund. I kept planting, my hands steady in the dirt. I'm not asking anyone to choose sides. You don't have to, dear. Truth has a way of choosing for itself. That weekend, I saw Dad at the country club parking lot. He was getting into his car when two men walked past him. I was too far away to hear their words, but I saw his face change. Saw him grip the steering wheel and sit there for 5 full minutes before driving away. The certainty he'd carried for months was finally starting to crack. Dad showed up at Eleanor's estate on a Tuesday afternoon. I was pruning roses when I heard his car in the driveway. My heart jumped into my throat. He walked toward me slowly, his face hard. Mariel. Dad. I've been hearing things. Stories about you stirring up trouble, trying to turn people against your sister. I set down my pruning shears carefully. All I've done is work. That's not what Cambria says. Eleanor appeared on the porch before I could respond. Mr. Vance, I don't believe we've met. I'm Eleanor Reeves. Dad's jaw tightened. I'm here to talk to my daughter. Of course. But I should tell you, all she's done here is grow things. Beautiful things. She arrives at dawn, works until dusk, and treats everyone with kindness. If that's stirring up trouble, then I wish more people would. Dad stared at Eleanor, then at me, then at the gardens blooming around us. He opened his mouth, closed it, and walked back to his car without another word. Cambria found out about Dad's visit within hours. She called me that evening, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you try to manipulate him? How dare you turn people against me? I sat on my motel bed, phone pressed to my ear, and felt nothing but sadness. I haven't said a word against you, Cambria. Not one. You're a liar. You've built this house of mirrors yourself, I said quietly. I'm just standing in the sun, and you can't handle what that shows. She screamed something else, but I'd already hung up. Through the thin motel walls, I heard her call back 3 more times. I didn't answer. That night, her husband overheard her ranting about me, about Dad, about money that wasn't adding up. Their argument shook their whole house. The following Saturday, Cambria and her husband hosted a dinner party. I heard about it later from Mr. Dowram, who'd been invited. Halfway through the evening, Cambria's husband asked her in front of everyone about discrepancies in their charity accounts. Why does the foundation only show $50 donated when you told me you gave $5,000? Cambria's face went white. That was a different charity. No, I checked. Where did the money go, Cambria? The argument exploded. Guests tried to leave politely, but Cambria's voice carried through the whole house. Dad arrived late to pick up something he'd left there earlier, and walked in just as Cambria screamed, "You always chose her over me." That's why I had to lie. The room went dead silent. I wasn't there, but I could imagine my father's face. Finally seeing the daughter he defended for what she truly was. I only learned about the dinner party because I'd arrived at Cambria's house to deliver flowers Eleanor had ordered for a neighbor. I stood in the doorway, unnoticed, watching Cambria unravel. Her perfect mask had finally cracked completely. Dad stood frozen in the middle of the room, his face gray. Cambria's husband looked at her like he'd never seen her before. And Cambria. Cambria sobbed and screamed and said things she could never take back. I didn't stay. I set the flowers on the porch and walked away quietly. Let them see, I whispered to the night air. Just let them finally see. I drove back to the motel and slept better than I had in months. Not because I was happy about Cambria's pain, but because the truth was finally doing what truth does best, rising to the surface where everyone could see it. 2 days later, Dad called me. The phone rang at 6 in the morning, and I almost didn't answer. His voice came through shaky and small. Mariel? Can you come home? Please. I need to talk to you. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Home? Yes. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but please. I got dressed slowly, hands trembling. I drove through the early morning fog toward the house I'd been thrown out of months ago. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky pink and gold. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Dad standing on the porch waiting for me. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I got out of my truck and walked toward him. He was holding something in his hands, an old book with a letter tucked inside. I found this in your mother's things, he said. It was hidden in the poetry book Cambria said you stole. We sat in the living room, the same room where he'd thrown me out. Cambria was there too, sitting small in the corner chair. Dad handed me the letter. It was in Mom's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before she died. My dearest Howard. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I need you to know something important. Mariel has always been the one who sees people clearly. She's never lied to us, never manipulated, never played favorites. I know Cambria is struggling with jealousy, and I've tried to help her, but you must not let favoritism blind you after I'm gone. Mariel will always tell you the truth, even when it hurts. Trust her. Protect her. She's stronger than she seems and kinder than anyone deserves. Love, your Beth. My hands shook as I read. Dad's face was wet with tears. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I chose comfort over truth. I wanted to believe Cambria because losing you both was too hard. So I sacrificed the one telling the truth to keep the one telling me what I wanted to hear. Cambria sobbed in the corner. I just wanted you to love me like you loved her. Dad turned to Cambria, his voice gentle but firm. I did love you. I do love you. But love doesn't mean accepting lies. The morning light streamed through the windows, bright and unforgiving. It showed every crack in the walls, every dusty corner, every false thing we'd all been living with. You stole your mother's jewelry and blamed your sister, Dad continued. You took scholarship money meant to honor your mother's memory. You destroyed Mariel's reputation to hide your own shame. Cambria couldn't look at either of us. I'll pay it back. All of it. I know you will, Dad said. But that doesn't fix what you broke. He turned to me, and his whole body seemed to shake. You don't owe us forgiveness, Mariel. But I owe you the truth. I failed you. I chose wrong. I let fear make me weak, and I hurt the person who least deserved it. I didn't know what to say. The apology I'd dreamed of hearing felt hollow now that it was real. The next Sunday, Dad stood up in church and apologized publicly. He told the whole congregation what had really happened, how he'd been wrong, how he'd let one daughter destroy another. People whispered and stared, but he didn't stop until he'd said everything. He placed the same apology in the local newspaper. A full-page ad that cost him more than money, it cost him pride. Cambria left town 3 days later. Her husband filed for divorce. Cole sent me an email I never opened, then another, then stopped. Mr. Dowram visited Dad weekly, helping him navigate his guilt. Eleanor smiled when I told her everything and said, "You planted seeds of truth, dear. And look, they grew." I moved out of the motel and into a small cottage near Eleanor's estate. My garden restoration business had more clients than I could handle. People who'd believed Cambria's lies called to apologize. I accepted their apologies but kept them at arm's length. Some betrayals leave scars even healing can't erase. 6 months later, Dad signed the house over to me. Your mother wanted you to have it, he said. I should have honored that from the beginning. I walked through the empty rooms, seeing them differently now. The living room where I'd been cast out. The kitchen where Mom taught me to bake. The garden where I'd learned to coax life from seeds. I opened every curtain, letting sunlight pour into corners that had been dark too long. Dust particles danced in the light. I could almost hear Mom's voice. Light finds truth, baby. Always. I decided to turn it into something new. Not a place haunted by what was lost, but a place built on what survived. I would live there, grow there, build my business there. I would let the gardens bloom wild and free, the way Mom always wanted. That evening, Eleanor came over with wine and friendship. We sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky. A year later, my garden center sat where Dad's old workshop used to be. Flowers bloomed in every corner. Clients came from 3 counties to see what I'd built. I taught classes on garden restoration, on coaxing beauty from neglect. Dad visited every Sunday. We were learning to rebuild trust slowly, carefully, the way you rebuild anything broken, with patience and honesty and time. He was different now, humbler, more willing to listen. Some days were easier than others. Cambria sent a letter once. I read it and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond. Maybe not. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone, including myself. I stood in my garden one morning, dirt under my nails, sun on my face, and realized something important. Revenge wasn't what broke the house open. It was sunrise. When truth finally came through those windows, everything that needed to fall did. Everything that needed to grow, did. I walked through blooming gardens, roses and hydrangeas and lavender, calm, strong, and finally free. Mom was right. Light always finds truth. You just have to be patient enough to let it.